All right, so this is the beginning of April 2014, our call tonight, and I just mentioned that I wanted to have us speak a little bit about our interests in general and in particular as it relates to this call and this group of people, and also to start to identify priorities as distinct from just interests. And this should not take long to get started. It should be easy to get this started. I can give some examples. My wife and I talked about some of this stuff earlier. Valerie, you were making some similar references. Could you just list a couple interests and or priorities of yours?
Sure. An interest would be nutrition, health, consciousness, grounding, the universe, good conversation, things that make me think critically about things, growth, contributing to others in the world.
Okay, so that's a pretty good list of interests. The only one that I would I could ask you to elaborate on what you mean by the universe and how that's an interest to you. If you have a quick answer and you want to share it, that's fine. I'm just going to note I got nutrition, health, growth, consciousness, quite a few others that were clear to me. Do you want to say anything more about universe?
I like contemplating what I can't see and what I can know.
What you can't see, but what you can know.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Two of the things that I had in mind to bring up were learning, just in general, learning, and also the unknown. And those two, of course, go together. The unknown is this huge field from which we can learn things. So when I make reference to an emotion like gratitude, that's part of a learning sequence. Fear, we were talking about, Valerie, earlier, somebody who might be really sensitive to what's familiar to them or what might be dangerous, like physically damaging. And so when there's a fear or a sense of caution, then people may be interested in learning a little bit more about something before they try it. So fear, in the context of learning, is kind of like a brake. If you were driving a car, you would take your foot off the gas and even put on the brakes a little bit and slow things down, slow the learning process down before in order to clarify things that might be important.
That's cool, JR. What about gratitude? You were saying that was also kind of part of the curve or whatever.
Well, I'm looking at all emotions as part of the curve. This is a little, I'll say a little more right now, but you have your general, I categorize things in the attractive and the repulsive. So the attractive emotions would be joy, gratitude, curiosity, certainly. I might not call it an emotion, but close enough. Repulsive would be anything that involves withdrawing or pushing away. So that would be rage. Frustration would fit with that. Shame. Grief, actually, would be withdrawing into oneself. Typically, there might be, reaching out to a particular trusted companion or something, but in general, grief is not an attractive emotion on the whole. It's like something that would slow someone down. So gratitude in particular, if I am overwhelmed with gratitude about something and I'm surprised, then I know that must be a priority for me. I must be really interested in that. I might not have really recognized that or acknowledged it or put time into my schedule. So if I have a sudden, like tears come to my eyes kind of experience of gratitude, well, that's a signal, right? So is that clear, Valerie?
Yeah, that's very cool. Thank you, Jer.
So let's see. Max, did you want to say some of your interests or priorities?
I would say, well, I covered the grounding part. The water part I'm still working on, and I'm going to order that water from, from who, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm much better on my diet now. It's about 90% raw.
Uh-huh.
Meat and fat and what else? That's it for now. I'm still researching, but that's all I'm focused now.
Yeah, and in my experience of you, Max, I believe you like to research things. You like to learn, like just in general. Not everybody is comfortable, exploring things. You seem either you know a lot accidentally, or you must like to learn. Like, I'm not sure, but what do you have to say about that?
Well, I do research and I talk to people and I visit forums, and that's how you learn. I read the PubMed publications on research from medical communities, so my research is pretty balanced, and my business is related to health and longevity. So if you stop learning, it's basically and I just really love reading stuff. My passion in life is health. So, and you just have to figure stuff out. It's not simple, but it's exciting. And some people exercise or watch TV. I read stuff and learn stuff.
Okay. And I want to just note, some people might feel really cautious or even embarrassed about attempting to learn something on their own. They may be concerned that they, have a really basic question, or there's all sorts of issues that people can have come up when it comes to taking initiative in regard to learning something. So to listen to a call, obviously, if you're just listening, it's not much of a risk, and not it's something that somebody can be really comfortable, and then ask for further questions later. You can read things and so on. As far as reading, my comment would be, I've read a lot less of books. I've read plenty on the internet, but I've read a lot less books in the last decade, I'll say. And I've probably talked to actual living people much more, and chats on Facebook and messages, that kind of thing, text messages. We could count that, but there's definitely the potential for accelerated learning from watching a video or from directly interacting with somebody or in a group, etc. Do you want to say anything as far as interests? My wife identified. I can share your interests, right?
Sure.
What were they? Health, money, and what?
Those were my priorities.
Oh, those were the priorities. Health, money, and one more. We don't remember.
The interests were literature.
Yes, literature. Her interests were literature, mythology, and languages. And by languages, what do you mean? Learning new languages, like foreign languages.
I only speak 3 and know 2 more.
She only speaks 3 and knows 2 more. I guess, like, she can read them, like Greek she can read. So, go ahead, Valerie.
I said, wow.
So a next thing, when we look at some of our interests, we that helps to guide us in terms of when we go about prioritizing, the activity of prioritizing, it's going to correspond to our interests, and we're going to look at things like what kind of time is involved, what kind of money, if any, is involved, and really important, what kind of results can we anticipate. If we are clear on what kind of results are available, that's huge in terms of something shifting from an interest into a priority, or some particular method for exploring an interest. For that method to become identified as a priority. I want to do that 2 hours a week for the next 10 weeks or something. That's a commitment. That's a manifestation of a priority, or you could say an interest, either way.
I like that.
So Max actually mentioned, now Max, you did not order yet, but you're planning to within a few days, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, when I get to it, I have so many things on my list of things to do.
Yeah, so you have a list, and it's likely that you'll do it within the next 7 days, probably, right?
Could be.
Could be. Okay, maybe not likely, but it's possible. So, the idea of having a list obviously goes with what we were just talking about, the process of prioritizing. So, I have a file that I haven't shared yet, but I have in front of me. It's not published as a blog or anything. The first thing it says basically is name a priority or interest, and we've got a few listed. My wife's were health, finances, and...
Those are priorities.
Okay, those were the priorities. Health, finances, and I know there was a third. Well, you also mentioned career, but I think that was later in the conversation. In my case, no surprise, health is definitely one of my big interests and priorities. And you guys probably will also realize, oh yeah, peace was her third priority. So health, finance, and peace. And we actually talked about peace a fair amount the other day. One of my other interests, I'll say, is emotions and how emotions are related to learning, as I said earlier. Peace, to me, was related to emotions. Health was related to emotions. So a lot of times, these things are going to overlap to some extent. When I say, here's my actual list, and my intention is to go down this list in order, and then maybe I insert something in the list and I change the order, on Thursday or review it and go, I'm gonna move that further down the list or postpone it. All of that kind of stuff is prioritizing, and people can do it individually. When people share that priority or that interest with another person, if they do it like as a commitment or a promise, then that can draw momentum and energy into that stated intention. Like, here's an action that I'm saying I'm going to do this, or here's a result that I'm going to produce. And some people will be interested in asking us a week later or a month later or whatever, hey, how's that going? And that's just, some of that's just a normal, natural process of socializing and interacting with people. But for couples and businesses, having some very specific structure can be really valuable. So we got a variety of priorities or interests. I'm going to assert that to a certain extent we share several interests, and that's why we're on this call together. My next note is, as a possible topic, is the idea of filtering our experience to select for things that correspond to an interest or a priority. Certainly if we're already familiar with electromagnetism and grounding and how it affects how being barefoot on the ground affects the flow of blood and the relationship between one red blood cell and the other red blood cells. If we're familiar with those things, then we're going to be able to have rapid conversations about them, have powerful results by taking new actions. If we want to have radically new results, then small changes in action are not likely to produce big changes in results. So if we want to have big result changes, big action changes are something to consider. So I was talking about grounding. If I'm interested in grounding from the perspective of the health of my family, that's a little different than I'm interested in grounding as something to do in a business. So if I'm going to sell information about grounding and say, hey, if you have issues with high blood pressure, then here is a really simple, really fast method that anybody can use. And, I start to frame my exploration from my interest in a profit motive and making it into a business. So no matter what, in life, we've got interests and we've got priorities. We may be really relaxed and open, even drained or unenergetic at certain times. But the idea here is that whatever our interests and priorities are will affect our perception. So what we actually will perceive will be organized by our prior interests. And when I say prior interests, I mean our continuing interests. They're already present, and they continue to be present. So I'm interested in health. And based on that, when I say unpasteurized milk or raw milk, some people will say, but isn't that dangerous? And some people will say, oh, I love that. And oh, I used to do that when I was a kid. That was the best milk I ever had. I haven't done it in a long time. I wonder why. And people say whatever they say, and it's based on, do they share an interest with me? Am I completely boring them because they're completely focused on their they're driving? If they're on their phone while they're driving, well, it's not a priority, whatever I had to say about grounding. They want to focus on getting to the right exit and safety and all that, and that's understandable. So there's shifting grounding all the time. I'm just going to pause here to see what Valerie just typed. Do you want to read that, Valerie?
I'm interested in answers. Just was coming to my consciousness as you were speaking. Finding the right questions to ask to get the answers I seek. Some I may not even be aware that I am seeking.
Okay. So, say more about that. I mean, what do you mean by answers?
Hi.
Hi, Rose.
How are you?
We're doing great.
Good.
Hi, Rose.
Hi.
I think it comes with me for the natural desire to learn.
Okay.
And wanting to know and understand more. And the more I interact with others, the more my questions are becoming clearer to me.
Okay. So I'm interested. I think to actually make a comment that's definitely out of sequence with my planned sequence, but just it comes up. Learning is a natural thing. You take a puppy, you take an infant, whatever. What do? They learn. It's just like that's how it goes. And as time goes on, for most of us, we've been exposed to social influences that will encourage us in certain subject matter to learn about and in certain methods of learning. And we also may be discouraged in regard to certain methods or certain subject matter. And certainly when we're talking about electricity, if you have a 2-year-old, you encourage them to learn about electricity with supervision, right? So the idea that there are subject matter that we should forbid or consider taboo or sacred, meaning that we do not discuss them in certain contexts or with certain people, or only with certain people do we discuss them. That all fits in, and I was hoping Scott would be on this call because he sent me something in private this week that I was going to comment on. I guess maybe I'll say more later. I want to go ahead and acknowledge that Rose just joined, and we also I didn't say this at the beginning of the call, but I did state that we're going to plan to conclude an hour and a half from now, which would be 2 hours from when we first started, just to repeat that and acknowledge that. I don't remember asking if we had anything to cover from last week, if people were going to share on any issue, but if anybody knows that I have jumped ahead and anybody wants to back up a little, feel free to. Otherwise, I'm going to slow down in case somebody has a comment there. Otherwise, I'm going to take a moment to catch Rose up in a minimal way, at least. Rose, we were just talking about interests and priorities as things to clarify. I'll put it that way. So we stated interests like health, finances, peace, grounding, hydration, water, diet, nutrition, growth. I stated learning and how we relate to the unknown, which I think of as related to learning. Rose, do you think of any other interest that you would have that is really important to you that we didn't mention?
No, those are some of the most important things to me.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised to hear that. Okay. So, Max, you had put a link up there. I do want to acknowledge that, and if you want to talk about it now, I don't know how it's related. I didn't click the link yet. If you want to just tell us about it later, that's fine.
If you're doing grounding, make sure to use this device. I think it's the cheapest one I found on Amazon. They have pricey versions of it. Make sure the ground in your electric socket works, because a lot of times when people do wiring, they don't connect the ground wires properly, so it doesn't work. So you try to do grounding, and it's basically useless.
Yeah.
So when you do this, when you have this device, you actually can check all your electric wiring and see which ones is wired properly and which one is not. That's it.
Okay, thanks. We found, I believe it was at a dollar store. It wasn't even at Home Depot. We found a surge protector that included a test light, so you could. Oh, it was at Home Depot, she says. But we can use that device as well. So there's a variety of devices. Some of them may be more, as Max said, more pricey or even more precise or something. We just. I can feel when I'm grounded, so I don't have too much of an issue with it. But yeah, I think that's great for people to be aware of it. And if you're not, if you aren't able to feel a increase in circulation or a relaxing of the tissue that's actually touching the wires, then it's. I think the thing we got was like $6 or $8. It wasn't expensive. I don't know what that one cost. Max, do you have an idea? Max, do you know what that costs?
I think it's around $5.
Yeah, so these are pretty accessible, and you can get them at hardware stores. You can get them from Amazon, etc. So very good. Does anybody? I know my wife has her comment on grounding. Does anybody else want to say a little bit more about grounding? Since Rose, we have another person on the call that is here in Arizona. And she is not set up with a microphone to speak, but she is able to hear us, just so you know. And I'm recording the call, and I didn't mention that while you've been on the phone, so I'm recording the entire call, just so you know. Anybody have a comment on grounding and any experiments that they've done newly?
I have something.
Go ahead.
Well, when my son was, I think he was about 6, he put a dime in a plug, you know, and it scared him. I know that because I wasn't in the room, and when he took me in the room to look at it, and it's still there. It was all smoked out, and the dime was like changed. I can't remember what happened to it, whether it got cut or, I mean, he obviously got a shock. So he put a dime in a socket. I mean, he's never done it again, but that would be a flow of electricity that hurt.
I'll be right there. Okay. So one of the things, I'm coming back to the microphone. So one of the things that I'm really interested in as it relates to grounding is that electricity is actually what triggers the twitching of muscles or the contracting of muscles. So you guys have heard about, like, if somebody grabs a live wire with their hand, the electrical flow through the wire will actually make it where their if it's their fingers or their hand kind of like making a fist around a live wire, it can be very difficult to knock them off of that because the electricity is actually causing their muscles to contract around the wire. However, with grounding, what I've found related to electrical flow is that when I put a wire specifically on these are relatively thick wires, I think they're called 14 gauge wires, and when I put them right on a specific area, I can typically feel it, like it relaxes almost immediately if it's tight. And a lot of times I'll do that on little, there's a lot of little muscles in the skull and in the neck and stuff. There's just so much, muscle close to the surface, and that's a lot of the places where I will often find that I value putting the little, wire in a very specific spot, just the end of a wire. A lot of the time I do lay on a uninsulated wire where it's covering, a couple feet of contact in a row. But so anybody have any reports on positive effects from any new experiments they're doing, or any effects? Valerie, you can just speak if you'd like.
Like when you use the wire, like what were you specific thing were you, especially the long wire, were you trying to heal anything with it or just using it to relax?
I use it to promote health, so I'm not necessarily targeting any particular diagnostic issue or, if I have, I basically I'll know when I'm stressed. And what is stress? It's muscular tension, or one aspect of stress typically is physical muscle tension. So I can put a grounding wire around my belly just because it's convenient. Like, the lower back and belly is just like right above my waistline. It's just really convenient, easy. Right, where I have the natural gap between my pants and my shirt if I'm wearing clothes. I'll also use around my neck because, again, it's convenient, and a lot of times that's where I have interest, is stress in my neck. Let's see, I have a scratchy throat. I don't know if you guys can hear. I don't know if it's scratchy, but it was worse this morning, and I actually put the little wires, I just thought, well, if my body needs to make new cells in that particular region, like my throat and my neck, why don't I provide electrons? Because it takes a lot of electrons to make new cells and new compounds and so on. So I put it there, and I felt relief very specific to the actual little area, so I could move it like a centimeter or a quarter inch or whatever, and move it around and feel it actually incrementally relaxing the tissue and easing the irritation. It's not like it was painful, but it's like, an itchy throat, so I could feel that it felt better. And then I did it for, I don't know, at least 10 minutes moving around different areas. So that would be in a case where I was using it in a really directly remedial context to remedy a particular complaint. When I'm tired is probably the number one signal that drives me, motivates me to go and, lay down with some grounding wires and really relax. And I don't just mean tired like sleepy and normal, but like drained or drowsy or something like that. I don't know, I guess that's not that clear what I mean as distinct from sleepy, but there's normal kinds of experiences where I think I'm going to just rest, and other things where I think I'm a little stressed and I need to rest, but it's not like I'm going to go to sleep for the night. So, in the afternoon, I'll often do that. Valerie, why don't you just ask your question out loud?
Max, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just got here, yeah.
Yeah. How do you use all the grounding knowledge that you have for health?
Well, I posted a website with a fabric, and there is this fabric is made out of bamboo and silver, very grounding, and you can buy a strip of it and connect it to the ground, and when you sleep, you're basically grounded. I also have 2 copper plates that I connect to the ground and put my feet on it. And I have also a ground wire that I use on the computers to ground my wrist. And that's basically it for the winter. But most of the time, the best grounding and the best energy you can get is bare feet touching a tree. That would be the best type of grounding, and it's also very healing.
Sitting under a tree, putting your feet right on the roots of the tree?
You're standing facing the tree, and you put both of your hands on the side of the tree.
Oh, your hands, okay.
So it's basically like a filter. You from one hand to another. It basically, if you stand long enough, at least 10-15 minutes, what happens is the tree, normally big trees work better because they're older, and if you can find a tree that is 1,000 years old, it's just ridiculous, but it works so well. So you face the tree, you stand, you touch the tree, and the tree energy will do a lot of healing on you just within 10-15 minutes. And it's been proven scientifically to be true, so I'm not talking out of my ass. There is a book, I have to find the title, that I would recommend people to read. A really good book on science behind trees and grounding and actually water.
Yeah.
Too. It's a very good book. I have to find the name and I'll post it.
I've got a question for Max, and I do want to note, just to expand my reference to sitting at a tree, the tree tends to provide shade, obviously, in the appropriate times of year when it has leaves. And so the shade tends to increase the amount of water that's in the soil right at the roots, plus trees tend to grow where there's water, where there's moisture. So electricity flows through the moisture. There are lots of cases, I haven't read the book that Max is referring to, but there are lots of cases of famous spiritual leaders going off to sit under a tree for short periods regularly or for long periods and so on. The question I had for Max was just a yes or no. If the answer is yes, we may come back to it later. Are you familiar with the Anastasia books, Max?
What is it about?
Ringing Cedars of Russia and Siberia, the cedar tree. No. Okay.
No, I'm familiar with the culture, the whole Russian culture. Since I'm from there,
Right.
I'm familiar what you're talking about.
Cool.
I'm not familiar with the books.
Okay. They're actually pretty popular books in the U.S. Does anybody else just? I don't want to get off into this right now. Just does anybody else? Okay, Rose is aware of that book. Okay. I was going to ask if anybody else is familiar with it, and my friend Carl, that actually Mary knows, we were just visiting with him today. He was talking about things like sprouting. What was he sprouting? Peas, buckwheat, wheatgrass, all sorts of things. Clover. And what he'll do is he will put the seeds in his mouth for something like 9 minutes. Yes, Mike, Anastasia of Siberia. And Carl will put the seeds in his mouth for about 9 minutes to moisten them to help start the sprouting process. So they actually are exposed to his energy and his saliva, of course, and he also is exposed to those, the energy of the unsprouted hard seed. We had Mike join us a few minutes ago. Just as a reminder, we had planned to end an hour and 15 minutes from now. Mike, I'm recording tonight, and we have, I've just mentioned Mary, we're not expecting her to speak any, but she's on the call, just a new person, by the way. And Mike, I wanted to just acknowledge that you had joined, and we'd been talking about interests and priorities. If you want to just state like one or two or three really quick, what are some of your interests and priorities, and then we'll come back to where we were. Go ahead.
I would say I'm interested in the grounding and everything. Kind of the line that you've been talking about now is really interesting to me.
Yeah. And if I asked you to name a couple of priorities for you, what are some of your priorities currently?
With regards to topics?
In life, with regard to outcomes is really how I mean it. Like where you put your time, where you put your money, where you put your attention.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay. Well, grounding is an interest that corresponds to an interest in health or a priority of health. So that's, a lot of people mention health. And it could be, like Valerie was bringing up, it could be remedying some particular health issue, or it could be promoting fertility and there's just all sorts of different kinds of priorities people can have that are more specific than health as a general priority. Anything come to mind, Mike?
No, just health, I guess.
All right. Valerie put cars. That I didn't expect. Sex, I'm not surprised that Valerie put that. Love, I'm not surprised that Valerie put that. Health and wealth, also not surprised. Cars, tell me about that, Valerie. Oh, was that for you, though?
Those were just examples,
Okay.
like to help Mike think of
Oh,
what his
okay.
priorities might be.
I think that you are a big car fanatic now. All right. I have friends that are really into cars, and I can't even keep up with their terminology. I was going to try and fake it, but I'm not good enough to even come close. Go ahead, Mike. Mike?
Okay, I was just going to say that health is the only important thing on that list.
Okay, all right. So, happiness, I mentioned. My wife had mentioned peace. I just reminded myself that humor and playfulness is also a priority for me. So I want to kind of give acknowledgement to the Anastasia idea just briefly. So Rose, you mentioned a lot of vegans are interested in it. If you would say just maybe a 30-second comment on why would people be interested in that book, that series, why might we come back to it later? Just tell us some of what you know about it.
I really don't know very much about it, but I've participated in raw forums, and most of the people were raw vegans, and there was a lot of talk about it, and there was forums about it, but I didn't participate, so I'm sorry. I don't really have to say about it.
So there is a Facebook group that actually sells like cedar products. The oil, I believe, of the cedar trees, and the ringing cedars is the name of the title, and they actually are trees that vibrate in the frequency range that humans can hear.